When you look at your work schedule, do you groan at the number of meetings you have and brace yourself for those that are going to run over because of off-topic conversations? I'm Courtney Lloyd, and you're listening to the Peaks and Valleys podcast, where we talk about the challenges of running a seasonal business. Although our interview guests run agribusinesses, these discussions will be applicable to any small and mid-sized business. Today's guest is Greg Skotnicki, president of Market Maker, and someone who hasn't looked back since using EOS, a set of simple concepts and practical tools that help business owners focus on what is really important for a company to be successful. Hello, Greg, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lisa.
So full transparency, Greg and I work together. Greg is the president of Market Maker. And to add context to this conversation, I'm just going to do a small plug for Market Maker. We are an investor, a majority investor in agribusinesses. So we're building a portfolio of agribusinesses. And currently we have 4 in our group of companies. So Greg and I have worked together a long time. And for as long as I can remember, albeit some days that's not so long. When we talk about priorities, Greg has referred to an analogy with pebbles and sand. Can you share with us that analogy, Greg?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not sure where I first heard this, but I think it's a story of a university professor with his first year students in class. And if everybody can think back to that, being in class, lots of people, and he basically had in front of him a bucket, and he had some big rocks, and he had some pebbles, and he had some sand, and he had a beer. And he said to the class, how can we get all these things in here? And the idea was, well, let's start with the big stuff. So he put the big rocks in. And he said, is this full? And the class said, no, you could get more stuff in there. So they takes the pebbles and he puts them in, and he shakes the bucket, and they sort of move around into some of the gaps. And he's like, is it full? And they're like, no, you could probably get some sand in. So they take the sand and put it in, shake it around, and moves into all the crevices. And finally he's like, is it full? And they're like, well, no, it's a beer. You could fit that in. So he pours the beer in. And of course, the question is, well, what's the analogy here? And so he says to them, so this is your time. You have only so much time. That's the bucket. And the question is, can you fit all of these things in? And it's really about the order that you put them in. So the big rocks are the really important things. And for that would be, family and your health and making and important things like that. And then the pebbles, and if I think about this at work, it would be, the big things are the big priorities. The pebbles are sort of the day-to-day things that if you've gotten the big things in and you take care of those, the pebbles you can always kind of find time for. And the sand represents, the people that come and bother you all the time, or the things that, drive you nuts, or problems. And those will always get worked out as well. And then, of course, the question is, well, what's the beer? And he says, no matter what, no matter how you fill this thing up, if you do it right, wrong, there's always time for a beer with a friend. And so the idea here is, if you apply this to work, it's really about how do you make sure the priorities get done. And because if you do it in the reverse order, you put the sand in, then the pebbles, and try to get the rocks in, it's not going to fit. And so it's all about prioritizing.
Right. So that I love that analogy, and I always have remembered it. And a couple of years ago, you introduced a book to us called Traction, which we all embraced right away, because I think it's fair to say it does help us make sure that we are working on those big priorities first to get them done. So can you tell us a little bit about Traction? And in it, they talk about an entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS as we call it. So 2 questions, really. What is it from your perspective as a president, and why is it important?
So EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I came across it a couple of years ago. It's effectively a way of providing or putting sort of rigor and discipline into the management of the company. And it's something that I had always been missing, or had tried to put my own systems in place, but it never fully covered off everything. And the EOS is really this system that looks at going to say sort of 6 really important areas of a business that you have to worry about. And it takes all of those things and it connects them, and it creates a common language for people in the business to talk with, and eliminates, confusion. It gets everyone aligned. It's, to me, so once you eliminate sort of all of this drag of confusion and things like that, you get everyone pointed in the same direction. That's where the magic really happens. And those 6 things, you might wonder what they are. Well, every business really needs a vision. Sorry, you can survive without these things, because many businesses do, but the ones that thrive and do really well are the ones that have them. So, vision. Do you actually know where you're going and what you're trying to get done? Pretty basic. Do you have the right people? So do people in the job, do they want the job? Do they get it? Do they understand what they're supposed to do? And, do they have the capacity and capability to do it? Data, and this is where I think a lot of companies fall down. They don't, or at least ones that I used to run, we didn't really monitor the data that we really needed to. So that's another important part. Process. Do you actually have, like, the most common and most important processes? Do you actually have them down pat, like a proven process or a way of doing things? And then the last 2, issues and issues management. Like, how do you tackle issues, and do you get them solved? And then traction, which is really the idea that you're able to prioritize what the company needs to do, and actually advance it. So you really move the company forward, as opposed to, a lot of companies, and ones that I've been involved in, we create a strategic plan, and 4 years later we're still in the same spot, or not much has advanced. So that to me, it's like, it's cut away a lot of the confusion, gives everyone a common language, and an ability to, and a way of doing business, of managing the business, that's just really, it really has, it sort of launched us way further ahead than where we would have been right now without it.
Right. And I should mention, like, we're a small company. We're under 10 people, and we have, as I mentioned earlier, a number of companies who work within our portfolio. Can you give us a little bit of insight into how EOS supports us understanding what the companies are doing? And I guess for companies that aren't the same structure as us, it would be similar to having departments underneath you.
Exactly. So, if you're just one person and dealing with, one company or one other person, you don't need a system. You're just talking back and forth to each other. But when you add 2, the number of conversations have gone now from, one between 2 people to now 3 conversations. And if you add another person, all of a sudden, everything is going up exponentially. You've got 8 conversations going on now. So what EOS does is it allows us to actually scale. And so what we've done is we've said, listen, the only way that we can actually build this portfolio and add more and more companies is to have a system that we can all talk with and understand the same language. So we've implemented EOS in each of these companies. And what it allows is, and we just saw it recently, we each of the companies presented their budgets and their plans, annual plans, and we saw a consistency of each company and how they're talking about things, and it allows us really to scale and do more things, because all the information is coming to us in a consistent way, and you don't have to decipher what's going on and think about, what are they saying or what do they mean, and you're getting all the information. That's the other part, is that you're not getting, there are parts that aren't missing, because everyone's following a consistent approach. So it's really like putting in this backbone system where, that it's a bit of paint by numbers, I've got to be honest, but it allows for creativity in other ways. So, for those who don't, if you believe that you need a structure to be successful, and I think every business needs structure, this is one way of doing it.
Yes, and I can second that. And as somebody, I've been in the business for, well, almost 30 years. And so you think you know how to do it. And when you introduce this system, part of me was like, is there anything wrong with what I'm doing? And I think the beauty is in its simplicity and the amount of time that it has saved, not just on, like you said, meetings, but the prioritization has freed up space in your brain, because you're not thinking about things that you don't need to think about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months down the road. You park them in this, well, we use 90 as a digital template for us, and we know we'll get to those. And so for now, let's focus on what's the priority in the next quarter. So it's a great one. I want to add one more complexity, how this system helps us. And that's a complexity that we see again in our portfolio because we're dealing with seasonal businesses. So what I mean by that is, there's points throughout the year where the teams are really, really busy, and then it slows down a bit. So in your experience, how has this system helped those types of companies?
Yeah, there's a tendency when you're without a system that um, as the workload grows because you're in the busiest part of the year, the season, there's a tendency, if you don't have a system, that okay, we'll push off this meeting, we won't do this, we won't do that. And what EOS does is it actually still provides guardrails. You can reduce the amount of time in the meetings and things like that, but you're still making sure that all of the key things that are needed to advance the business still happen. And so you can flex the system appropriately based on how busy people are, but it ensures that those priorities never disappear. They may get delayed, but they don't. They're always there. And because of the methodology, like the standard, we call it an L10 meeting, a level 10 meeting, which is sort of the management meeting. The format's the same. You can condense it to an hour, you can condense it to 30 minutes, but you're always, this consistent approach to how you're managing the business is always there. And so I think seasonal businesses, instead of not having meetings and not doing things, just cut them down, but you still get all the things done that are important.
Great, thanks. So I know we can go on and on because we love this system and use it and have seen such great results, but for sake of everybody's time, I think what I'll do is I will flash up the book and also the consultant who we have worked with, who's an expert in this, Scott Moore. And so anyone listening to this can check it out themselves. So thank you very much, Greg.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
You've been listening to Peaks and Valleys, the podcast on seasonal business. Peaks and Valleys is presented by Market Maker Agriculture, a long-term hold private equity company that invests in agribusinesses across North America that have seasonal cash flows. For more information about Market Maker or suggestions for a topic or guest, contact seasonal@marketmakerag.com.